Hey, it's News from Heaven. Today we're looking at how there is a union of minds in a twin flame relationship. Can you have true love that brings people closer and closer together? And how does that work? And how do you get closer and closer to somebody? And why is it that we seem to have this natural yearning? If you look at movies, if you look at all kinds of art that we produce, this idea, oh, there's a perfect match for you and things can get better and better and better. How's that work? How does it happen? Does it happen? And all this is part 2 of our 3-part twin flame series. And I'm doing a twin flame series because I have a hunch. And the hunch is that, so if you haven't heard of twin flame, oh man, it's a phenomenon right now. Just go search it on the internet. You'll see there's all kinds of material being produced about this. Again, I think because people feel there's some kind of mystical connections that we can get in. Twin flame, sometimes you talk about soulmates. I think we can get a lot of insight into this conversation and phenomenon with Swedenborg's, even though it came out a few hundred years ago. I think we're talking about an enduring reality, what he calls amor conjugialis, sometimes translated conjugal love, sometimes translated married love. Spiritual Marriage is a show we did about it. So can we get some details of how this happens through Swedenborg? I think so. And these particular details come from Heaven and Hell, his book. Download it for free in the description if you want to follow along. And if you do, you got to scroll, man. You're going to have to scroll all the way to 375. Let's see what this can tell us about the union of minds in this twin flame or conjugal relationship. Everyone knows, which would include us, right, that two spouses who love each other are intimately united, and that the essence of marriage is the union of spirits or minds. Does everybody know that? I guess. I mean, I think there's still a point or two in there that's worth making. So we got this unition, this being intimately united, which I guess you could think if you're actually really like in a relationship that's got love and commitment and all, those are a kind of uniting. But that the essence of the marriage is the union of spirits or minds. And I believe he's using this, we're talking synonym here, that for him, consciousness. And again, this is all based on the out-of-body sort of what we would now call spiritual experiences that Swedenborg meticulously cataloged using his brain that was at the time was putting him at the forefront of the study of science in Europe, and saying, now that I have access to this spiritual world, how can we describe it and categorize it and catalog it just like we do the physical world? He's saying consciousness is your spirit. The conscious part of you is your spirit. Your mind is in the spirit. So you have this interface between physical and spiritual right now happening in you and in me. And this is somehow the actual uniting is happening on the spiritual side. That we've got the connection physically, but there's something deeper. This is how we get the union of minds. Okay, I just wanted to finish the boxes around those. Those are nice and satisfying. People might therefore realize that the essential nature of the spirits or minds determine the nature of the union and the nature of the love the two have for each other. I don't think I realized that. So what's being said here is, if we're talking about, you've got this sort of, can you get this true love connection? And can you deepen it? Can it become this soulmate twin flame thing that gets better and better and reaches this cosmic level? The essential nature, what determines that? Is it your chemistry? Is it that you two have to be? He's saying the essential nature of the minds determines the nature of the union. So what each of us is bringing to that relationship, how we think and feel about things, that determines the nature of the union and the nature of the love the two have from each other, to have for each other. Isn't it, do you think like, oh, love will come and change you and it makes you into a new person? But I believe what we're getting here is that actually it's going the other way. That what you have going on in your mind here is what dictates through steps the nature of the union you can have with a soulmate. The mind is formed from nothing, and here we start to get into this, again, this sort of metaphysical definition of what's going on in the spirit/mind. The mind is formed from nothing but things that are true and things that are good. The grand duality echoed across all of Swedenborg, the true and the good, substance and form. You have will and intellect. faith and charity. Since everything in the universe, oh, hey, I could have spared you that. Since everything in the universe goes back to the good and the true and also to their union. Okay, so we come into this episode with a human people-centric picture of this, but what we're hearing now is that actually goodness and truth have this union at a fundamental level, these two primary elements of the universe, and that can be mirrored and echoed, or is actually the source of what brings us together in this kind of loving union, that we are participating in this great cosmic pattern in there, which doesn't sound so bad. So the quality, and look, this is where we start to get into, what are the mechanics? How can we make this union happen, or what does it depend on? So the quality of the union of minds depends entirely on the quality of the true and good elements that constitute those minds. So if you're thinking about two people, what makes people compatible for something like this? It has to, let's say this is the mind. Yeah, you probably by now get a sense of the quality of the art. It's about as good as it gets here. But if we have little truths in the mind, these will be the ideas, the principles that we live by. It gets down into facts and things, but more expansively, this is the systems by which we live our life. Then the goods, our motivations, what we really believe in, what the hopefully positive things that we cultivate. It's those things in the mind that are the basis, the determining factor of whether we can have this twin flames relationship. This means that the most perfect union, okay, here we go, is a union of minds formed from things that are genuinely true and good. And to me, that's a huge distinction, because it doesn't relegate everything to what's the individual chemistry between people, and that you can have this great union because you're just so right for each other. Sure, there's an element of that. Swedenborg does talk about conjugal pairs being born for each other, right? And that there's a potential partner out there for everybody, but it's not just the fit alone. It's really made possible by getting each of your individual minds as full of goodness and truth as possible. That's what makes one of these relationships really able to happen. And to me, that's cool, because we can all work to fill our mind with goodness and truth, and knowing that's the element, not like, can I get lucky or I've got to find the right person. You can be working on this potential for this relationship by filling your mind with what's good and true and acting on those things. It does need to be realized that there is no greater love than the love between the true and the good, which is why real marriage love comes down from that love. Again, back to this Monet I painted here. This is the greatest force in the universe, the greatest love that exists somehow. And it seems a little bit weird, but it seems like everything we learned about the basics of how the physical universe works is a little bit weird, so this would fit right in with that. The good and the true, the two fundamental, we'll make the good red this time, these two fundamental principles in life, they, even though they're almost like the spiritual equivalent of atoms, that I don't really understand fully, comprehensively what he means when he says good and true, even though it's all over Swedenborg's writings, I still feel like I'm trying to get new insights into that. Somehow, these, by the way, being the two primary elements of God, these two things not just coexist, but they love each other. They love each other, and it's from the love between what's good and what's true that we can get the love between two people that fills this sort of soulmate twin flame conjugal trajectory. And that, think about, so what would that mean, the love between what's good and true? Well, if you think about having some desire to do something, you're moved by some kind of feeling to do something better, and then the truth being the means by which you can accomplish that, and those two are united in action. So if you see a gesture of love, those two things are in there. That's a good first inkling into what does it mean when the good and the true come together. It does need to be realized that I already read that, which is why real marriage love comes down from that love. What is false and what is evil also love each other, but this love later turns into hell. To complete that, yeah, so we've got goodness and truth. Swedenborg says that that's the grand duality, but also there's falsity and evil, which are the opposite or absence. Oops, I wrote that. I wrote this is, they're not in orderly columns. It's beside the point. Falsity and evil are the opposite or the absence. So evil is the absence of good. Falsity is the absence of truth or the opposite to it. This is everything that's outside of God or God's plan. This is everything that we look around and say, that shouldn't be like that. People should not be treating each other this way. Falsity and evil have sort of an illicit marriage with each other. So why would that be? Well, think about it. Let's say I want to do something that's evil or live in a way that's evil. And I know there's a lot of gray area and how can you say what's evil? But there's certain things that you and everybody else, you can tell at least from a distance, even if somebody could commit them without fully realizing the consequences. There's certain things that are evil. There's certain things that are a problem. Whatever word you want to use, there's certain things that are harmful, that are diseased or dysfunctional. There's stuff that we would be better off without. And stuff that just works against love, works against people's happiness. That stuff, if you're trying to, and there very much is a draw in the human psyche or ego to do a lot of those things. The lust for power or for control or for wealth at the expense of others. These things, there's a draw to them. We have to keep it at bay. And there's all kinds of people acting out negative stuff because they like it, because it's fun. So let's say I feel like, I want to do this thing that I know I wouldn't want done to me, but it's like, I like it. What do? How do you get past your conscience? Well, you got to latch on to something false, because the truth is everybody is an equally valid human being. You shouldn't do something that is harmful because it hurts. But if you can get into some kind of falsity of like, well, I can do it because I'm somehow special, or that person isn't really as conscious as me, or they're not on the same level as me, or I don't really mean it. Whatever it is, the evil loves that falsity because it allows itself to exist. And people who want to continue a lifestyle that does that, they always have their philosophy that justifies that. That's part of the marriage between falsity and evil. We may conclude from what has been said thus far about the origin of marriage love, just which people are actually involved in it and which people are not. Okay, so again, marriage love being a thing we can be doing in our mind as well, with the goodness and truth, getting that in there. How do we know when we're in it? How do we know when we're not? People who are focused on divinely good realities because of divine truth are in marriage love. Isn't that? I thought, if you're saying marriage love, people who are in a good marriage are in marriage love. No. People who are focused on divinely good realities because of divine truths are in marriage love. This is the first marriage. You have to get a marriage here between the goodness and truth in your mind before you're equipped to have a kind of marriage with somebody else who is your, soulmate, who is connecting the goodness and truth in their mind. That is the step that anybody can be doing anytime. And marriage love is genuine to the extent that the truths that are united to the good are themselves more genuine. Important to point out that Swedenborg, in our previous episode 1 of this series, you see that Swedenborg say, basically, true conjugal love is very rare in the world. And we don't know exactly how rare that means, but it's not just if anybody goes through a ceremony and puts rings on, then it's there. There's something positive in that, but the actual genuine marriage love or conjugal love, or what I would assert is the same thing as like a twin flame soulmate kind of thing, is there, and it's there to the extent that the truths and the goodness are united in us, and that those are genuine. So the more our view of the world actually reflects how the reality really is, and the more that the true compassion to others is linked to that, the more that you can have a good soulmate relationship with somebody, which is, to me, not something I would have thought of. Unless he said, this is not just, of course, you can, any sort of relationship book will tell you that. So that's the exclusive Swedenborg experience. Further, since everything good that is united to truths comes from the Lord. Okay. So, sorry to pause at a comma here, but if we're saying you've got to have goodness and truth united, and God is who can, again, going back to amazing art, God is who unites goodness and truth. So there is, I know you can see it coming a million miles away, there is a divine component to a true soulmate relationship. It follows that no one can be in real marriage love who does not acknowledge the Lord and his divine nature, since apart from this acknowledgement, the Lord cannot flow in and be united to the truths within us. Okay, okay, but how are you going to say that God has to be part of a relationship between two people? My thought is, if you look at, we're trying to fill up our minds with goodness and truth, and that you're trying to get into a state where you can have a real, intimate, loving, co-equal partnership with somebody, where you're not trying to do the opposite of marriage love, which Swedenborg says, trying to control somebody kills marriage love. Trying to dominate the relationship kills marriage love. How do you get into a state where you're actually open to that and you have goodness and truth? Well, part of it is the humility and willingness to not be the master of the universe that comes in the relationship with God. That is essential to getting the correct view of life. And if you have to have the right goodness and truth in you to do marriage in the first place, or conjugal love in the first place, you've got it. You can't not get where love and truth are coming from, because to be a marriage of goodness and truth together, you've got to be based on the marriage of good and truth, which is in God. Is that anything? Did I just say anything? Okay, well, hopefully so. But to me, I feel like that makes sense. We can see from this that people who are caught up in false thoughts are not involved in marriage love, especially if those false thoughts stem from evil. Okay, so it's a problem. If you are going out and harming the human race from an evil intent with a distorted picture of the value of people, there's no way you could maybe get along with someone well, but there's no way you're actually going to be uniting a mind with somebody, because you either love or you don't. I think that's the message of Swedenborg, that we can often get it twisted where we feel like, oh, if I just love my one group of people, or I just love people who are like me or who honor me and flatter me, I love, but Swedenborg makes this fascinating distinction, which is like, you love or you don't. If you're loving what's good and true, which is like the happiness of everyone, the idea that everyone is equally human, then you love. If you just love your own group, it's essentially the same as just loving yourself, because you just love them because you kind of identify with them or they serve you in some way. You got to have the love to really get this partnership with somebody that comes out of God and out of heaven. And people who are engaged in evil and consequently in false thoughts, the deeper levels of their minds are closed. So this part that has to get opened up just doesn't have the receptors. This means that there cannot be any source of marriage love within them. However, on a lower level, in the outer or natural person divorced from the inner, there is a union of the false and evil, a union that is called the hellish marriage. Yeah, so you've got the heavenly marriage and the hellish marriage. And the heavenly marriage is the union of goodness and truth, and the hellish marriage is the union of falsity and evil. So if we want to get out of the marriage of falsity and evil, that sounds really intense, but we're in it all the time. Anytime I'm in a state where I'm doing something that I know is not right because I'm triggered or that's a little marriage of falsity and evil. I snapped at this person. I did something that I shouldn't have done. That is not what I would do when I was in my best days. That's a little marriage of falsity and evil. As we work to get out of those and get into more states where goodness and truth are together in us, that's how we prepare and be an individual example of this marriage that can then come into this larger expression between two people. And then those two people, believe it or not, that's not where it stops. That this union of minds isn't so we really love each other and that's so great and that's all we want to do and forget the rest of the world. That is another step to now together in this awesome relational unit, we can go and continue serve the human race more effectively, because you're really just like you tie the goodness and truth together in your mind, you tie two people together with that, you tie the human race together with all that love that's coming in, we're also tying into God at the same time. This is the divine pattern echoing through everything, and that's the news from heaven. How did you like it? Did you get anything out of that? Let me know in the comments. Please leave one. How does this square with your ideas of a twin flame or soulmate relationship? How can we be doing this right now? Does this clear something else up for you or improve your life in some way? I love to know about that kind of stuff. Leave it in the comments, like and subscribe, and then stay tuned. We're going to have the finale to this series next time, where we actually read a first-hand account of Swedenborg observing a couple who's really got this right in the spiritual world and what kind of amazing conditions around them that creates. That's next time. Thanks, everybody.